Good morning, everybody, and welcome to one of the best stages in the greatest tech show on earth. Welcome to SaaS Monster. Today I'm going to have the pleasure to introduce to you some of the greatest founders in SaaS scale-ups today, from Algolia to Medallia to CrowdStrike to Domo, and also we'll have C-levels from some of the big players like SAP. We're going to look at all sorts of topics, from the effect of the influence of CX on the purchasing decision, to SaaS metrics, to how we transform large enterprises. So we've got an amazing show for you today. But before we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's close to my heart. 100% remote SaaS companies, a new wave of company. And I've been working that way for 5 years after over a decade working in a high-touch enterprise environment. 5 years ago, Richard Branson said that in 30 years' time, we'll ask ourselves, why did we have offices? Why do they exist? But big companies don't agree with them. Salesforce, for example, is about to put 4,500, or is putting 4,500 people into the Salesforce Tower in San Franscisco, the second tallest building west of the Mississippi. So why this dichotomy? Let me ask all of you something. So a little bit of participation. Let me ask you, please put your hands up and keep them up if you've worked in an office with 100 to 150 or more people. Please put your hands up. Now, in all honesty, keep your hands up if you found it sometimes difficult to get work done in that environment. In all honesty. Okay, nearly every hand stayed up. So we've all experienced it. Constant interruptions, someone tapping your back, the social pressure to talk with colleagues, sudden meetings that take an hour to get 5 minutes work done. We've all done it, and that's after a long commute for some of us. So we've all been there. And often when the numbers in an office explode, you get to the point where it just feels a bit different. I left Salesforce the first time because even though they were growing like crazy and I had these valuable shares, I sold them cheap because I just wanted to go and work in a small place again because it was more fun when it was small. The same thing happened to many of the people who went into this movement. So, for example, if we think about someone like the CEO of Hotjar, Dr. David Darmian, he left his office because it was scaling to such a point that he really needed to go and create his own startup, and he believed in the remote movement. So he actually built a company called Hotjar, which does session recording and feedback type software. And he's got about 70 people spread across the world, and he's one of 4 founders that live on Malta. But even though they all live together on Malta, they don't communicate to each other normally, and they deliberately don't socialize. And the reason they do that is they want to empathize with those colleagues, those non-founder colleagues, across those 17 countries who work remotely as well. And he's built that to a point where it is, at this stage, 20 million annual recurring revenue. And that's, just in 4 years. I also interviewed a lady called Bridget Harris, who's CEO of a company called You Can Book Me. Now, they've reached 3 million in annual recurring revenue, 1 million bookings per month, and they've done that with no sales, no marketing, and no funding. And how have they done that? Well, they've done that through building a product that can be easily shared, that's very easy to use. So it's essentially easy to use, easy to share, it's viral. And in fact, she has a motto where if you need to bring someone in to onboard your product's broken. You probably need to fix it. Now, that doesn't work for all business models. There are higher touch business models, but it's a great motto to have. And even Salesforce themselves used, ironically, that high-rise building to explain to people SaaS in the early days. In the old days when we were explaining it to skeptical ears, it was you've shared water, shared electricity, shared security, the spiel. But every company could actually configure their own office their own way. And now the question is, we know we don't need servers in the office. The next question is, do we need on-premise people? We don't need the on-premise software, but do we need the on-premise people? And that's really, really a big question. And the thing is, we didn't evolve. We didn't evolve to work in really large workspaces. There's a lot of research around that. Can you imagine 1,000 cavemen and cavewomen all together in a cave? What would happen? And do we really think we can redesign those spaces in such a way that we can overcome our own evolution? So there is a massive change coming. But part of what I'm talking about is 100% remote, which is a little bit different to your 20% remotes. And there's a growing fleet of these companies now. It's not just You Can Book Me and Hotjar. We have, for instance, Balsamiq for wireframing websites. We have Basecamp for project management. In iPaaS, our integration platform as a service, we've Zapier. And the thing that they have in common, apart from being 100% remote, 100%, everyone working separately, everyone with remote technologies and remote methodologies, is that they're all acing it in customer success and employee success. If you don't believe me, take a look at G2 Crowd's quadrants for their software categories, and you'll see them right over on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side as you're looking. That means customer satisfaction, they call it, but it's really customer success. They're all acing it in Glassdoor as well for employee success. So these companies are doing, incredibly well, and that's one reason I believe the wave is going to grow. Another reason would be the valuations for companies doing co-working spaces. I mean, depending on who you believe, WeWork is valued between 3 and 40 billion. And that's got to do with the whole remote movement. Also, companies that make hardware that empower all of this, they've known for years that massive working spaces don't work that well. So, Plantronics have the stats for that, and they've known that for a couple of decades. So the next time you go into these open office spaces and they're trying to hire you because they've got these, beautiful sofas and pool tables and stuff, don't assume that's an efficient way to work. The company might be a growth machine, but that doesn't mean that you're going to become a super efficient worker in there, that you're going to get deep and meaningful and effective work done. Not all that glitters is gold. So 100% remote companies only really work if they focus on employee success. So they have incredibly intricate ways of hiring. They have to. If you're hiring somebody 1,000 miles away from you, you have to be sure that they're the right fit for that. So they're very strong on hiring. We can learn an awful lot from this movement. They tend to employ people who will embrace transparency and super efficient communication. Imagine what all companies can learn from that. They also reward their employees very generously. And this is really a common thing across the movement that I've seen. I've been interviewing a lot of them. If I look at Hotjar, for example, they give their employees 40 days planned vacation per annum. And if I look at You Can Book Me, they pay their Spanish engineers double the market rate. So there's something very special about that movement. They really look at the employee welfare and the work-life balance of the employees so they don't burn themselves out. So they don't ascribe to Jason Lemkin's, when you get on a rocket ship, work 100 hours a day. They're completely against that. So take a look at that movement. Now, nothing's perfect. There are some problems. So, for example, loneliness, that can happen. So you've got to hire people who do tend to have access to coping mechanisms and are a little bit stronger in that. They can wake up and just do their stuff every day. Try to get people that are close to co-working spaces, that are close to cafes, which become an office space if you have a good headset. The other issue really is innovation. You can't really beat easily the Amazons and the Googles and the Salesforces throwing a few people into a room for a week and coming up with a new product with all that faith. There's a hit on the face-to-face. But here's the thing, for any of you who've worked in SaaS, 99% of what you do is rinse, repeat. 99% of any successful company's activities is actually stuff you already know. And that's where the remote movement is strong. They get deep and effective work done. And that much more than makes up for the innovation hit. And by the way, on the innovation side, because they've less meetings, because their communications are a little less overlapping, they tend to work out all the shiny stuff that doesn't really work and get rid of it before the meeting. And people talk because they've something to say, because time is precious in those environments. So they don't talk because they're good at talking. So in the room, it's not the loudest person, it's the smartest person or the person that has the relevant idea at the time. I'm not saying remote's the only way. There's other companies that have amazing office culture in this world. Algolia will be, Nicolas Desaigne, who I interviewed last year, will be on this stage today. And they have amazing culture built on transparency and seeing every customer problem as an opportunity. They have an incredible culture built in Paris and San Francisco. Intercom have amazing culture built in Dublin and San Francisco. They publish a comic for each one of their employees every year to celebrate their anniversary. Every year, your face inside a coolly drawn comic. So there's lots of cool companies that are not remote. So I'm not saying they have a monopoly on values and employee success. What I'm saying is that we underestimate how big and how valuable and how liberating, if you work in that domain, that movement is. There's one other challenge I haven't touched on, and that's scale. And these companies are often bootstrapped. So I don't see the next Salesforce or Workday or ServiceNow coming out of the remote movement within the next 5 years. They tend to be bootstrapped. They like to keep control of their companies, and they hire very carefully. If you hire very carefully, it's more sustainable. People stay longer, but you're not going to boom through the sky with a load of VC capital thrown at you and a load of marketing and salespeople. It's different. But as DHH said, and he's the guy who created the Ruby on Rails system, Workframe. He's also the co-founder of Basecamp, one of the biggest proponents of the movement. As he said, if you start out to create a unicorn, you're probably starting from a bad place. The probability of that happening is very low, even though we're going to introduce some of those people today. He says, why don't you make a dent in the universe rather than try to own the universe? Because there's room for thousands of SaaS companies to succeed, not just a few dozen. And for thousands of SaaS companies to improve the lives of their employees. And that's good news for all of us. So if you're a founder or a future founder of a company, and you want to be more the author than the reader of the narrative of your own life, why not build a company that attracts similar people who also like to be in control of their own lives? Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you. So, as I said, today we have amazing companies like Algolia, Medallia, loads of them. Too many to mention. And we're going to cover many cool areas like SaaS metrics, transforming large enterprises, people-powered data versus big data, CX guiding purchasing power. We were talking about amazing things this morning and then more again this afternoon. But now, everyone, please give a warm welcome to the stage to Procter & Gamble's CTO, Alan Boehm, who will explore how large enterprises can transform their business in the digital age.